Here are the corrections for the 113 review preview. The very first question is asking you in problem 19 to use your graph from problem 17, which was from the algebra walk, to answer the question below. Part A says, how can the graph for the rule y equals 2x plus 1 be used to predict the results for an input or an x value of 7? For this problem, what you're being asked to do is figure out where x7, if x is 7, where it falls on the line. So a lot of you said plug it in, which if it didn't say to use your graph, would be a valid way to do it. But since it says to use your graph, what we're going to do is we're going to go to 7 on the x-axis, and look up to see where it falls on the line. So that's what we're trying to do for this problem. So we're going to look up to see where it falls. The next question asks us, it says, how can the graph for the rule y equals 2x plus 1 be used to predict the output y value associated with an input of 3.5? So it's very similar to the problem before. Instead of, though, going to 7 on the x-axis, we're going to go to 3.5. So we're going to do the same thing, go to 3.5. On the x-axis, and look up to see where it falls on the line. So it's the same idea. The only difference is that instead of going to 7, we're going to 3.5. The next question asks us, it says, if you wanted an output of 7 for the rule y equals the opposite of x plus 4, what would you need as an input? Well, in this problem, we're trying to figure out, all right, what number do I have to put in for x to get 7 as an output? So I know that 3 plus 4 equals 7, but if I was plug 3 in, that would give me a negative 3 plus 4, which is 1. So I have to somehow figure out how to make that positive. Well, I know that the opposite of a negative number gives me a positive number. So if I would just plug in negative 3, I would do the opposite of negative 3 plus 4, which is the same as 3 plus 4, which equals 7. So I would need to plug in negative 3 for x to get the correct answer. Then for part D, it says, for each of the rules in part A through E in problem 117, where does the graph cross the y-axis? Describe any patterns you notice. So a lot of you said it crosses 0, which isn't wrong. It crosses at 4 and 0, which isn't wrong, but it wanted you to actually list all of them out. So the point where it crosses the axis for each one, for graph A, it crossed it at 0, 1. For B, it crossed at 0, 0. For C, it crossed at 0, 4. For D, it crossed at 0, 4 again. And for E, it crossed at 0, 0 as well, just like B. So you could have noticed several different things as your pattern. One of the things I noticed is that it crosses at whatever number is being added to the equation. That's not what I wanted to do. Number being, I'm going to go up the side, being added. So if my equation was x plus 4, I knew it crossed the x-axis or the y-axis at 4. If it was just x, it crossed it at 0. So if nothing was being added. So it all depended on where it crossed the y-axis was depending on what number was being added. The next problem. So this is a review from last year. It says solve the problem below by defining a variable and then writing an equation. If you find this too challenging, then use the 5D process described in this lesson's math notes box to help you get started. State your solution in a sentence. So in this problem, several of you got the problem right. You just didn't follow the instructions where it said to define a variable and then write an equation. So when I set it up, I used the 5D process. So I set up my 3 columns, and I had my define, I had my do, and I had my decide. I didn't do trials though, because I used variables. So I knew that my define was going to have 3 numbers, because it says Jabrea is thinking of 3 numbers. So I knew that this was going to have 3 numbers in it. The greatest number is twice as large as the least, so I'm going to use L for the least. The middle number is 3 more than the least, so M, and then G for greatest. The sum of the 3 numbers is 75. Find the 3 numbers. So I can say in the do, I'm going to find the sum, and I'm trying to decide 75. It's going to help me when I go to write my equation. So I made the least x because each one of them depended on x. And then it told me the middle was 3 more than the least. So I'm going to say x plus 3. The greatest was twice as large. So I'm going to say 2x. So to find my sum or my do and my decide, I'm going to write an equation. I'm going to do x plus 3 plus 2x equals 75. So now I have my equation. From there, I'm going to solve my equation to try to find my answer. Now the problem didn't say to solve it, so if you had written the equation, I did give you credit for it, but I think the best way to do it would be to solve. So I know I have 4 x's, 1, 2, plus 2 would be 4x, plus 3 is going to equal 75. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides to get 4x equals 72, and then when I divide by 4, I get that x equals 18. So I know that my least number is 18. 18 plus 3 is going to be 21. So my middle number is 21. And then 18 times 2 is 36. So my greatest is 36. So then I would write a complete sentence that would say the least number was 18, comma, the middle number was 21, and the greatest was 36. The next problem was about mean or average. It says Letitia's friend Brandy forgot to make up a test and had these scores: 80, 92, 91, 75, 89, 84, 0, and 85%. Calculate Brandy's average. Does this average score really represent her abilities? Why not? So in order to do this problem, I would first add them all together. So I would do 80 plus 92 plus 91 plus 75 plus 89 plus 84 plus 0 plus 85. And when I do that, I end up with 596. So I do 596 divided by, there's 8, equals 74.5%. So then it says, does this average score really represent her abilities? And the answer is no. Most of her scores are in the 80s, and her average is lower than 80. So no, most scores in the 80s. So no, it does not. So then it says, Brandy persuaded her teacher, Ms. Wands, to allow her to make up the missed test. Brandy received a 78, calculate her new mean. So I could re-add them all together, or I could say 596, that 0 is now replaced with a 78. So I would do 596 plus 78, which is going to give me, if I then divide that by 8, that's going to give me a mean of 84.25, which is much more like it. So then it says, what difference did the 0% score make? Does this new mean represent her ability more accurately? So the difference, it made like a 10% difference, almost. So it was almost a 10% difference. And yes, it is more accurate. So the next question says, the area of a rectangle is 24,396 square centimeters. If the width is 38, what's the length? How do you know? So I know to find the area, I do the base times the height. So if this is my rectangle, and I know my width is 38, I want to know what number, or x, times that will give me 24,396. So to this problem, I'm going to do 24,396 divided by 38, and I get 642. Do not forget to put your units. I will not give you credit if you do not have units on your answer. The last question says to use the number line below, locate the following numbers by placing the lowercase letters A through F on the number line corresponding to the values given below. I think a lot of you thought that this was multiple choice or did not change the answer into what it actually equaled. So for the first one, it's done for you. It's 2 1/3. So A is in the proper place. Negative 2.7 would be approximately between -3 and -2, closer to -3. C is 9/10 minus 4/100, which equals 0.86. So C is between 0 and 1, closer to 1. D is 33 1/3% of 12. Well, I know that 33 1/3 is 1/3, and 1/3 of 12 is 4. So D was actually right on the 4. And then the last one, E, 7/10 plus 2/3. First, I needed to make a common denominator and get 21/30 plus 20/30, which equals 41/30, or 1 11/30. So it's a little bit bigger than 1, so it's between 1 and 2. So E would be between the 1 and the 2. So approximately that's where all your dots would go. So don't forget to make sure you correct all of the questions that you missed and make sure that you return in this assignment.